Hi, it's lovely to see you again. Now, you were born Patrick Allen Lilly, but it was your grandmother who gave you the nickname Butch. Mm-hmm. And now you were 6 or 7 when you started in showbiz. Tell me how you got your big break.
My mom was married to a gentleman. We lived in a town called Gardena, and he was kind of an influential guy. And a friend of hers, her husband, wanted to be mayor. And he thought by being mayor, if he could get Dave Lilly's endorsement, it would be helpful in his campaign. So he cooked up this idea to get Dave's daughter. He was my stepdad. He adopted me, but he was my stepdad at the time. But Michelle, my little sister, was Dave's daughter. And he thought, well, I'll get Michelle into modeling and print and impress Dave. His little girl is the apple of his eye. One thing led to another. So he arranged to have a photo shoot for my little sister. The agent in question that was going to represent her was a brand new woman on the scene called Mary Grady. She thought a child-only agency would be a very interesting way to go, and she decided that she would be the first. So she was looking for clients. Michelle went for the photo shoot. I went with her. At the end, Amos Carr, who is the go-to photographer in Hollywood for children, looked over at me and said, "Do you mind if I take a few photos of your son? He's got to look." And my mom said, "Sure." He put that picture in his studio window on Hollywood Boulevard. And about a month later, we got a call from a producer and a director who had seen it, inquired about me, wanted to meet me. And I got a phone call from Mary Grady. And my mom said, "Hey, would you like to go on an interview for a movie?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure. But what about school?" She goes, "Well, if you get it, you won't have to go to school for like 6 weeks." And I go, "Oh, that sounds good." I went up and met the director and the producer, and they hired me on the spot. No experience. They liked me, and I wasn't intimidated by being around adults. I was kind of like wise beyond my years, and that's how I started the movie business. And I became Mary Grady's, pretty much her first active client, other than her son, who was Don Grady, who played Robbie on My Three Sons. So that's how it started.
That film was The Two Little Bears, and Eddie Albert and Jane Wyatt played your parents. What are your memories of working on that film?
The thing that I remember the most from that particular movie was we were actually working with bear cubs, live bear cubs, because the premise of the movie was we would turn in, we were enamored with bears and we wore little bear suits for Halloween. And one thing led to another. We get this magic salve and we put it on and we turn into bear cubs. And then they filmed the bear cubs getting into mischievous little situations with our voiceovers. But what I remember most out of that particular shoot was the older brother to me was kind of like pushing me around a little bit, and he shoved me and I fell into a banister and the staircase and I knocked my tooth out. And I said, "Okay, that's it. I quit." And they go, "Well, what do you mean you quit?" I go, "That's it. I don't want to do this anymore. Mom, take me home." So they were like, I guess they've never had a 7-year-old kid decide he doesn't want to be in a movie anymore. And it was like, "Wait a minute, you can't quit." I go, "Oh yeah, I quit." So I wasn't aware of the process that you couldn't quit. It was like, the show must go on type of thing. So they basically separated the kid, read in the riot act, told him to keep his hands off me. And one thing, they got me some ice cream, and the crisis was averted, and I came back and finished the movie. But I do remember that I quit. It's like, "Why can't you quit?" "Well, you can't."
You also appeared in an award-winning cornflakes commercial and an episode of The Untouchables, and then you starred in the very first episode of General Hospital.
Well, starred is a big word. I was in the original first episode of General Hospital. I was on camera quite a bit because the star, John Berendino, my mom was his girlfriend. So in soap operas, the kids are usually utilized to set up a scene to where, where's Katie? Oh, she's with Johnny, and here's Johnny and Katie coming in to see the star. So, but yes, it was a good experience for me to do General Hospital, no doubt about it.
And then came your role in The Real McCoys with the legendary Walter Brennan. And it really was that role, wasn't it, that opened the door to the Munsters?
Yes, I was on the last year of The Real McCoys. They had revamped it to where they only had Amos, Luke, and Pepina. So this other network resurrected it. They didn't have a love interest for Luke. Again, I played my mom's son, and I would go visit the McCoys a lot, and Luke had a fondness for my mom. So I was involved in a lot of shows because it was again a love interest for Luke McCoy. But working with Walter Brennan was wonderful. But then the Munsters came along, and my part on the Real McCoys led me to get the interview after the networks had turned down the two mom and kid on the pilot. The pilot had to be redone, and they brought in me and Yvonne. Actually, it wasn't redone. What they did is they saw it, they liked it, they just said recast the mom and the kid. And that led me back out to Hollywood from Illinois, where I just moved to with my grandma.
colour TV was becoming more popular in the 60s, and the Munsters pilot was actually shot in colour, but executives decided to go with black and white for the series. Do you think it was a good decision?
The show was a much better show in black and white because the Universal Studios was the monster studio. In 1931, they started the whole horror thing with Frankenstein and then Dracula and the Wolfman and so on and so on. The Mummy, the Creature, a lot of great monster movies came out of Universal. And they had these sets and they had the look and they had the style of these old movies integrated into the Munsters, the set design, the lighting techniques, and a lot of it looked like a movie. We were shot on film and it looked like little 24-minute movies, except we were a sitcom. The makeup for me was an hour a day, but it was only 3 days a week. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday were filming days. Fred Gwynn, who played Herman, he was there when I arrived at 7:30 or 8. He was already in the chair for an hour and a half. His was like 2 hours a day. And then there was about 20 minutes of wardrobe for him to get into his suit and get everything together. And then everybody else was between an hour and 2 hours, except for Marilyn, who basically, was easy because the first Marilyn had to put on a blonde wig. That took her a little time. But the second Marilyn, Pat Priest, she just walked in ready for makeup and wardrobe, and she was on the set in half an hour.
And the Munsters premiered at the same time as the Addams Family. Was there any ever competition, though you aired before they went to air or something?
No, it was just a coincidence, actually. The Munster concept had been around since 1950 at the Universal lot. It was originally animated. They had an idea for an animated movie, series, I should say. When Leave It to Beaver went off the air, the producers were looking for a new project. And the Munsters, it came along as a family. Someone had brought it to their attention about this animated concept, and they decided to do it in real life with kind of making it like a Leave It to Beaver with makeup, very family friendly, very structured. Herman was the patriarch, and Lily was the mom, kept the house. If you think about the structure of the American perfect family, the Munsters fit into it. We just happened to be in makeup, and we were monsters. But other than that, we were like totally typical everything.
Now, the Munsters was shot on the famous Universal Studio lot. You were a kid. Did you get to go around and have a look at what else was being filmed at the time?
I would always go exploring. That's what kids like to do, and at least little boys do. And I had carte blanche to go pretty much anywhere I wanted to go. I knew how to get into sound stages. If the red light was on, I knew how to open the door without causing anybody any grief, and I knew how to stay out of trouble and stay out of the way and not trip over cords and not bump into lights, and the things that most people, the people that have visitors on set, that's what their biggest fear is somebody not knowing something and making it, cut, we got to do it again because some idiot, walked into the light, and, so I knew how to do that. And I had an uncle out there that supplied horses to the three Westerns that we had. We had the Virginian, we had Wagon Train, and we had Laramie was out there. So I would see Uncle John occasionally and wave to him, and I'd go out to McHale's Navy. The Lagoon was probably my favorite destination. Or Ernie Borgnine was a great guy. Tim Conway, very, very funny early in his career. He was funny all the time anyway. But those were my target destinations. And then the Stage 28 Phantom of the Opera soundstage was not very far away from our Stage 32. And that was a big haunted stage, and it was the largest sound stage in Hollywood. And that was always vacant, and it was always a great place to sneak into and climb up 6 stories to the ceiling and walk the catwalks. Very dangerous place to be, but I did it. Most of the time when I went exploring, I did it in costume because it was easy for people to know that I was supposed to be on the lot. And it was like, oh, nobody would question, me going anywhere. But if I wasn't in makeup, then it would be like, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm Eddie Munster. It was just easier for me to take a break in the afternoon and get out of the soundstage, because honestly, on Mondays and Tuesdays, when I was done with my school, I wanted to go home. So I would use those days to get home early. And then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in makeup, those were when I had an hour or two to kill, I could look at the call sheet and say, they're not going to need me for an hour. It was easy to duck out and lose the teacher.
And of course, you were working with some absolutely incredible actors, Fred Gwynn, Al Lewis, and of course, Yvonne DiCarlo. How did they treat you?
Well, it was a very kid-friendly cast and a kid-friendly shoot, because number one, Leave It to Beaver, the producers had done Leave It to Beaver, which was really the first kid-oriented, designed and written from a kid's point of view. So they had that down, and all the adults had kids about my age. So that was nice. And I think the main thing is I did my job well, and I didn't give him any reason to have any problems with the WC Fields, don't work with kids or animals. But I did my job well, and I wasn't a pain in the ass, in my opinion. Pat Priest speaks highly of me. And so I think the fact that they treated me, and they all had kids, and they treated me well, and I did my job well, and then they started writing scripts featuring Eddie, that I kind of elevated myself out of the secondary kid role into an equal role as one of the cast members. As far as the working relationship, Fred Gwynn taught me a lot about acting skills, because we had some scenes together where there would be things that I wasn't aware of how to be a beatnik, for instance, when I do a thing where I'm the musician, where I learned to play a horn, and it turns me into like, hey, daddy-o, what's happening? And so Fred would coach me with that, so that was good. He taught me a lot of acting skills. Al Lewis was literally like a grandpa. So one of the things you got to remember is when this happened, my whole family was living in the East Coast, because my dad was my other father was a baseball player. So they all moved to the East Coast when he got traded. And I was living with my uncle, hiring a woman to take me to work every day. So literally the TV family for me was more of my real family. I was spending more time with them, acting with them, hanging out with them, going home with my uncle, which was great. But I didn't have my real family around. So for a couple of years, it kind of sort of morphed into me, working with them as they were like an extended family, but it happened to be on TV. Al was great about real life stuff. Yvonne was a wonderful mom. She was good. She liked me. I liked her. We had great, I was her only son, the only kid on the show. So there was a lot of maternal, type things happening there. And I think one of the things that I think the show's success lends itself to is it was a very believable, structured family. People bought into the fact that we acted like a family they could relate to, or acted like a family they wish they could live with.
Now, The Munsters was the first show to ever feature a hot rod. And of course, it was built by the legendary George Barris. Now, I read that Fred Gwynn once took one of the cars for a joyride with the cast in the car.
Yes, he did. He was supposed to turn around and come back to the front of the house because it was getting dark, and they wanted him back in case they needed to do it again. And that's like dangling a carrot in front of, you can't tell him not to do something, because that's exactly what he'll do. He'll do what you tell him not to. And he did. He drove out the end of the street, and we were, it was probably about a half a mile to the front gate, maybe a third of a mile. And we drove out to the front gate and just waved at Scotty, the guard, and took off on Cahuenga Boulevard. And Lancashire took a left, went to Cahuenga, took another left, and went up by the Hollywood Bowl. The biggest thing, my concern wasn't so much his driving or the cars. Do we have enough gas? It's not licensed. It's a show car. George's shop is only a mile down the road. I have no idea whether or not we're going to make it back. And the whole time, Yvonne DiCarlo was really yelling loudly that, Fred, we got to get back, or, she's got this long wig. It's blowing in the wind. And it was great.
The Munsters TV show only lasted for 2 years, but before it ended, there was also a Munsters movie. Tell me about Munster Go Home.
I have never, ever done a movie or a TV show or anything where the last scene in the script is actually the last scene you actually film. It just usually never works out that way. So at the end of a 2-year run and at the end of a 6-week movie shoot, here we are at 11 o'clock at night on the back lot, with soap suds on the street, simulating snow at Munster Hall. And we all jump in the car and we drive off into what would have been the sunset had it been daytime, but let's say we drove up into the moonlight. And that was the end of the show. That was the end of the era. And we never saw each other in the Munster type thing again. At least I didn't. And that was a very surreal evening.
Unlike a lot of other child stars, you weren't really typecast after the show ended. You went on to guest star in shows like I Dream of Jeannie, and there was that famous Monkeys Christmas episode. And you were lucky also because your mum wasn't really a stage mum, was she?
No, I didn't have that problem. I was very lucky to continue working. And I turned down a lot of work because I just didn't want to go up on the interviews. I would be in the middle of a football game, or something would be going on in the real world with the real kids. And my mom would pull up and say, hey, we got an interview. And what do you think? And I'd go, no, not today. And she never forced me. She'd give me a dirty look, like grumpy. But literally, I probably could have worked a lot more. But as it was, I kept pretty busy for 14 years. And that was that's all I ever really wanted to do. 14 years.
Then in the 70s, you filmed a movie in Brazil called The Sandpit Generals, and you starred in Sid and Marty Krofft's Lidsville, which was a follow-up to HR's Puff and Stuff. But you pretty much quit acting in 1974. Your last guest role was in Ironside. Did all that work set you up financially for adulthood?
Number one, when you're a kid actor, 10% goes to your agent. Government gets about 45%. You don't have any deductibles, deductions. So there's 55% out the door already. Your parents are allowed 25% because they've got to alter their world to accommodate your world. So now you're up to 70% is gone. 80%. 80%'s gone right there. So it leaves about 20%. When I got my money out of the bank, there was a deal when I was 19, they changed the voting law to 18. So I was in the last lottery for the Army, for the military, and the Vietnam War was going on. So I thought I would probably be, I got a very low number and I was drafted. I mean, I wasn't drafted. I guess I would be drafted because I got a low lottery number. So I thought, wow, I'm going to go to Vietnam anyway. So I petitioned the courts and I got them to change the rule and the law to let me get my money out at 18, although I was 19. The law was changed from 21 to 18. And having done that, I went up and I got my money out and I had $40,000 or whatever. And thinking that I was going to go to Vietnam, I went and bought cars and went to the beach and surfed. And the movie in Brazil when I was 16 had turned me on to beer and alcohol and weed and drugs and all that stuff. So in 1970, 71, 72 in Hollywood and in California and in the world, it was party central. I mean, people were doing it. It was very much like a Woodstock mentality for some. And I was a leader of the parade and threw the best parties. And I just kind of got wrapped up in it. And then I had a hard time getting unwrapped.
And tell me why November 21st, 2010 is so important to you.
That's my sobriety date. Yeah. I just had a 12-year chip. I had issues. I knew that I needed help. People that are in recovery will relate to this. People that are normies probably won't. But usually you sense that you're in trouble. It's acting upon it and getting yourself in a mental position to take the leap of faith, dropping the rock, they call it in the rooms. And that took me about 4 or 5 years, pondering it, tippy-toeing around the issue, waking up with a hangover, just swearing I'll never do it again and doing it again. But anyway, yeah, November 21st, 2010 was the day that I entered the Oasis Treatment Center. And I listened to what they had to say. I did what I was told to do. I started getting an education into why it wasn't weakness and, it wasn't you're a bad person. And you stop looking behind you and you start looking forward and all these things come into play. But once you arrive at a spiritual awakening that, you're right where you're supposed to be in life and there are no mistakes, it makes it a lot easier to accept your role and then not be the woulda, coulda, shoulda kid and looking back and, what if I'd done this? Because that serves no purpose whatsoever. It really doesn't. And it's nice to know that there's no mistakes and you're moving forward. But the biggest thing the happiest day or the biggest achievement for me, getting sober, was becoming part of the solution and not part of the problem anymore. And that was a life-altering day.
Did anybody help you get sober?
I had help, and then that's the beautiful thing about it is the help's available, and I help people, and they help people. And what happened was I had done a pilot for a gentleman in Long Island, and I was really badly drinking, and I felt bad that I wasn't up to the standards that I should have been. And one thing led to another, and a friend of his, Jody Ritson, she knows, she posts about it. She reached out to a third friend who happened to be in LA and said, we need to find a treatment center for Butch. What do you think? Because I had agreed to it. And he opened up the Yellow Pages and Oasis was right there. Just was kind of like, there it was. Didn't have to look any further. And he made the phone call. Then the phone call led to Jim A. And Jim A., the people that answered the phone, Stacy said, oh, Jim, we got, a child actor here, and he sponsored me and I went out for it. And one thing led to another, stayed in the program for a few years. And then here I just celebrated 12 years of sobriety. But it was a great program. It was the best program in the world. I didn't know it. I'd never been into rehab. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't fight it. And I looked at it as this could be a life-altering change. And he told me how many people I could benefit and help. And it made it easy to do. Not easy, but it made it doable.
We've seen other child stars struggle with drugs and alcohol. There's Leif Garrett, there's Johnny Whitaker.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so difficult for child stars to move on to being an adult star? Paul
Peterson, who, I don't know if you're familiar with that name, Paul from the Donna Reed Show, and he formed a minor consideration when his friend Rusty Hamer killed himself. And I'm a member, as are a lot of kid actors. And Paul's done some wonderful work. But it was funny. Me and Paul met. We grew up in the same town of Gardena, and we never met each other. But his wife was my neighbor's sister-in-law, and then we kind of met just accidentally at a Super Bowl party. We were both still partying and drinking, and then Paul got sober first. But I noticed that he got sober, so I'm thinking to myself, well, that's good. And he did this good work, and he formed a minor consideration. But the thing is, Paul gave me a very good bit of advice. He goes, people in the Hollywood, whether it be Elvis or Michael Jackson or the big name ones or the little name ones, people want to be around you, and they don't want to tell you no. They are your yes men, because you're either supplying them with drugs or supplying them with red carpets or supplying them with this, that they get something out of it that they don't want to lose, so they never tell you the truth, and they never say no. And that's why people in the industry have a tendency to number-wise, get into a lot more trouble, because nobody really calls them on their shit. Excuse my language. And Paul explained that to me, and me and Paul are still in communication, and he's very proud of what I've done, as is Johnny Whitaker. I did a meeting with Johnny recently. He's got 25 or 6 years now. He's way up there. He's got big numbers. But he was with the same agency. And it's weird. It's like people in kid actors, that they just sort of get a carte blanche thing. And Hollywood itself kind of like applauds bad behavior. They let you get away with stuff. And then you got to remember, it was the 60s for me. 60s and 70s, everybody was doing it. It was. I mean, if you could drink the most, the people applauded you. If you threw the best parties, which I did, people loved you. And and it just became easy. And I never thought about buying bags of weed and giving it away. I never thought about it as being illegal. It was just a whole different mindset.
Butch, you're obviously incredibly talented.
I don't know about that.
But would you say singing is one of those talents?
Oh, singing. No, well, I got a story about that. Okay, I just completed. No, it's not one of my talents. I'm horrible at it. But they didn't care. More Hollywood. So Lidsville comes on the air, summer of '71. The movie in Brazil, up for awards. I'm going to be a movie star, billboards, red carpets, the whole big nine yards. And the guy that made the movie shelves it. So no Academy Award nomination, no movie star status. Lidsville comes along, Saturday morning show, like from here to here. It's like, I'm really bummed out, but the Cowsills convinced me to do the series because I didn't want to do it. And I thought it was childish, and I thought it was on Saturday morning. I thought it was a step down at the time. But that's where my head was at. And I was wrong. Sid and Marty, love you very much. I was wrong. You were right. So my mom gets a call at the agency. She worked for Mary Grady, and says, these guys are calling looking for a teeny bop heartthrob to replace Bobby Sherman at Metro Media Records. And I put your name up, and you need to go meet these guys. I go, I don't sing, Mom. And she goes, they know that, and they don't care. So I go up and I meet this guy, Dennis Ganem and Vic Catella and Frank C. Slay. They're handling a group called Sugarloaf at the time, which was a fairly big group at the late 60s, early 70s. Green-Eyed Lady, Don't Call Us, So lo and behold, 3 months later, we've recorded a song. They dubbed it in. I'm on American Bandstand singing, lip-singing my little heart out. And we go on the road with Metro Media Record with their A&R man for about 6 months and spend a ton of money. And Metro Media doesn't sell any records because I can't perform because I don't sing. And they pull the plug on the whole record division. So I put a major corporation out of the record business. I was the original Munster Manili, long before Millie. Yeah. So then MTV comes on the air, and I decide with a partner of mine that we want to do rock videos, but we don't know how to do a rock video. So I wrote the lyrics to the Munsters, Whatever Happened to Eddie, to the Munsters theme, and we recorded it. We became the first unsigned act without a record deal ever to be on MTV. It was quite a feather in our cap. I wrote the lyrics, but this time I doubled up. I faked the bass and I faked singing. So Munster Manili. So yeah, literally I've got several records and a lot of exposure, and I've never ever really sang a note myself.
So who was behind the mic?
The gentleman in the band, Brett Black, he sounded a lot like me. His voice was, but he could carry a tune much better than I could. So I lip synced him. He sounded like me, believable. And Phil Cohn, the producer, was a bass player with Stuart Copeland, and he could play bass really well. So he laid down the bass tracks, and we faked it.
But you are a lover of music.
Yeah.
And you are friends with some pretty major music stars, including AC/DC's Angus Young. How did that happen?
I have a link to a lot of bands. It's for some reason, Eddie Munster has been really good to me. I have the utmost respect for musicians. Playing in front of a large, 50, 60,000 people is just amazing. Yeah, a good friend of mine, Cosmo Wilson, is the lighting director for AC/DC and for Aerosmith, and his resumes, he counted them up the other day. He's on tour right now with Judas Priest, and he just completed Blondie, but he's been the lighting director for 16 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame bands. And I'm pretty sure that's got to be some kind of a record. That's a lot of bands in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that you've been lighting for. So he did it from the Stones to the Cure. He started off with the Scorpions, but yeah, I met him at an AC/DC concert. I was going with a friend, and in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, I know somebody with AC/DC. Who do I know? And I called my sister. She goes, Cosmo Wilson, just Facebook him. And I did. And he said, if you don't like your seats, I'll come get you. And I went with my friend. We had these nosebleed seats. So I called him. I go, I don't like my seats. And I spent the whole concert sitting next to Angus's wife, Elle. And then we became friends, and one thing led to another. And I've been hanging with Cosmo off and on for the last probably 8 years.
Now, the Munsters have been reunited, revisited, rebooted several times, including Rob Zombie's The Munster movie. Were you involved in that?
Yeah, but I wasn't in Hungary. I didn't go to the set. I only did a voiceover after they were done back in the States. But I have been to Rob's house in Connecticut with my Munster coach, and we took it for a spin with Sherry around Kent. Had a good time. Then when I went out to visit him, he had just gotten back from Budapest, and I thought he had been over locations scouting, and he'd actually completed the movie. But because it's a prequel to Eddie and Marilyn, it's left with, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it leaves them right at the time when they bought the home. Cousin Lester's come and visited them with a big check that they give him some money, that he came with some money, and now what do they do now? So it's kind of like leaving it open for a sequel if he chooses to do so, which may lead to more stuff. But yeah, I was the voice of Tin Can Man, and also Pat Priest was the voice of Transylvania Air.
You say that you don't like social media that much, but you do have your own YouTube channel.
Yeah, nowadays you sort of have to have. I'm not a big social media person. I do it. I'm not against it if those who do it, but it's just not me. I'm just kind of an old dinosaur type of guy. I would be fine literally with a roll of dimes and payphones, and we went back 50 years. It wouldn't bother me in the slightest. I did fine. I was okay with it. But I do have an All Things Munster. My sister helps me with it. I also have another YouTube channel called Coach to Coast, spelled with a K, which was basically my first one about me driving around the country. A YouTuber friend of mine has got a very successful channel, Alpha 11. He said, well, as long as you're out there on the road, I can show you how to make a YouTube channel about your travels. And he kind of guided me into it. I remember the first one I did was the gravesite of Frances Farmer, a famous actress from the 40s that had a tragic life. And then we did more of those. And then I did some of my historical things that I like. And I got like 17 episodes of Coach to Coast. But the All Things Munster ATM started up when Rob was releasing the movie. And I've sort of been sitting on it a little bit. I just sold my Munster Coach. My new one's going to be done in October, but I have my new Dragula and I have my new Chopper. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to up it to where we're going to be doing a little more automotive related car show, beach stuff, location, follow me around, and that kind of a thing.
Talking about cars, you've always loved fast cars. You were 16 when you bought your first car, a blue Mustang. Did you actually pick the wrong profession?
Race car drivers, like some guys want to be an astronaut or a fireman. I wanted to be a race car driver, and I was very good at driving cars. I really was. But you have to have a lot of discipline, and you have to give up the party life, and you have to, you've got to suit up and show up. And I wasn't, even though I could drive cars fast, there's a lot more than being able to drive a car fast than to be a race car driver as a profession. A lot more to it. So that was a dream, and it was fun, and I still enjoy the muscle cars and growing up in the 60s and being around it a lot. I still have a lot of friends I was just at a wonderful function the other night for Lions Drag Strip, which was a big drag strip near my house that closed in 72. But I frequented from 69 to 72. And it was fun to see all the old guys and being part of it. And part of the 60s was muscle cars. And Detroit iron and horsepower and going to the beach and street racing. And, I wouldn't trade my window from 1953 to however long I've got left. I wouldn't trade my 53 to 73 years, that 20-year gap, the best cars, the best music, the best drugs, it was a wonder. Well, the weed, not so much. The weed today, it's like, one of the things I gave up too, I never thought I quit smoking weed, but when I gave up alcohol and I gave up everything else, it all disappeared. So I can't even, I don't even eat gummy bears, or cannabis or CBD or anything. Totally nothing. And it's really evolved to a point where if I was doing it, I probably would really enjoy it, but it's not a possibility. It doesn't happen.
Now, I mentioned at the beginning that your grandmother nicknamed you Butch, and I know you had a very, very close relationship with her. And several years ago, you bought and renovated her house in Missouri, which was actually haunted.
The 2 years I spent with Grandma, the year in Illinois before the Munsters and the year in Missouri after the Munsters, when I was year 10 and year 13, were very instrumental in my upbringing, because I think one of the reasons I got the love of Americana and the love of driving on the road was from her, because she would drive. She hated flying, but we took trains and we took her Cadillac everywhere. And she did antiquing, and I had a chance to see the country. She drove very slow and stopped everywhere, so I saw it really a lot up close. But this house that she had bought in Missouri, I always would visit friends because I went to school in the 8th grade there. So whenever I was crisscrossing the country, I would try to make a trip through Macon to go visit friends, just to keep up on them. And every once in a while, I would visit, maybe every 5 years. And a friend of mine reached out to me and said, "You've always shown an interest in Macon, and I think you should know your grandma's house is going to be demolished. It's been vacant for 8 years. If you ever thought about buying it, you better move quickly." So I wound up buying it because I had just purchased my Munster coach in Dragula, and it's the center of the country. So geographically, it was a good business move because I could drive and visit. I could be from the Gulf to Canada and the East Coast to, over here in about a 700-mile circle. So that was good. But the house was haunted. I really wasn't aware of that until I went and bought it. My sister enlightened me to Miss Ruby to say hi to her. The whole town knew the house was haunted. It just, for some reason, they never made themselves present to me, even when I owned it and lived there by myself. So, but yeah, I bought it, the roof on it, fixed the HVAC and made it livable, and the plumbing and the electrical. And then I turned it over to someone else. I was there about 3 years, and then I got divorced, and I wasn't there anymore. I was only there a few months a year as it was, and the house needed more attention than I could give it. So I sold it, but I saved it, and I was really happy that I did that.
And do you know what ghosts haunted it?
Yeah, Miss Ruby. Her name was Elizabeth Wardell. The house was built on a vortex, so there's a lot of like cross down traffic of ghosts. But the main ghost whose house it was Elizabeth Wardell. But my sister called her Miss Ruby, and then we found out that the reason her name was Ruby to my little sister, because my little sister interacted with her and saw her all the time. She had married a guy named Ruby, so she became Miss Ruby. So that's how her name went from Wardell to Ruby. But we kind of thought her first name was Ruby, and it wasn't. It was just Miss Ruby because she had married the name. So that's how that came about.
Now, talking about bizarre stories, a couple of years ago, you were involved in a cold case murder trial. Tell me about that.
It evolved. I used to hang out at this place, and I knew the victim, and and he was a really nice guy, and nothing should happen like that to anybody. But I'm in treatment. I'm 2 years sober back in 2013. And all of a sudden, I'm getting ready to sign a contract to do a big deal in Long Island. And the guy calls me and he goes, "Oh, have you seen the Enquirer today?" I go, "No, why?" He goes, "Well, we're not going to be able to, we don't think you did it, but we can't sign this contract because we're a family deal and the press will be horrible." And I go, "Whoa, slow down. What press?" And then I went to went online to see it. Munster murder bombshell. A guy was killed. His ex-wife set it up and did it. And then they attempted to blame it on 3 guys, myself and 2 others, one that lived in the area, Gary Upton, a good friend of mine, and then Jerry from California, and myself. Obviously, the guy was trying to evade arrest and evade, and for some reason, he went from accusing me of doing it and Jerry and Gary to then he said, "Oh no, I drove the getaway car." So his story changed as well. But the bottom line was, 8 years later, I'm called into it, and then it went away. And they pursued it, and there was nothing there. I went to Wisconsin on an unrelated matter doing a car show, met with the police, gave my DNA, cooperated with them. And then they said, we never thought you did it, but we have to eliminate you so we can nail the guy that we think did it. And I said, well, that makes sense. Where were you, 7 or 14 years ago? I go, I don't know. I know I wasn't there, but I know where I wasn't. I go, you don't understand. It's not like I'm a guy that goes on vacation once a year and keeps, Polaroids, and I can tell you exactly where I was at. I go, I'm all over the country. So I couldn't prove where I was, but I cooperated with them, and I flew into the witness box, as you call it, and had to bring an attorney with me. It was serious stuff. You don't want to get caught literally, unprepared. And that was the end of that. It was just a crazy time. And it's funny, sometimes being a celebrity can be a bad thing, because they try to, sometimes they'll try to bring you into something to save their own butt.
Now, what's next for Butch Patrick?
I'm going to build a haunted attraction here in Arkansas. And what I'm going to do, my dream, I do a lot of haunted attractions. I've been consulting in the haunt industry for a long time. I've been to almost every major haunt for the last 30 years. So I got a pretty good idea of what to do and how to do it. And I know the people that can build it. So my idea is to do a reversal of the Wizard of Oz, where it was black and white, and they go into Oz and it becomes color. I'm going to have you walk into the front door of the Munster house in color and open it up to the black and white soundstage that I was working on in 1964. So you're going to experience exactly what Stage 32 looked like. You're going to see the history of the Universal Monsters. You're going to have a chance to do a scene in the living room or in Grandpa's dungeon, to superimpose yourself into what it was like to be a friend of the Munster family firsthand, or a visitor. And then I'm going to work with an existing haunt down here to help him up his game a little bit. And then he's got 20 acres out behind that we're going to build a seasonal carnival and a hayride and a haunted trail through the forest.
Butch, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Keep in touch.
Will do. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.